So, welcome everyone. It's a delight to be here. We might begin with Lou very kindly leading the prayers. So thank you, Lou.
You're welcome. Let's see. The opening prayer is taking refuge and generating bodhicitta. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened, to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dhamma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened, to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dhamma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. Abandon evil doing, practice virtue well, subdue your mind. This is the Buddha's teaching. Like a star, an optical illusion, or a flame, a magical illusion, a dewdrop, or a bubble, like a dream, a flash of lightning, or a cloud, so should one consider all compounded things. By this merit may we attain omniscience and overcome our enemy, our harmful deeds. And may beings buffeted by the waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death be liberated from the ocean of existence. The Heart of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra. I prostrate to the Arya Triple Gem. Thus did I hear at one time. The Bhagavan was dwelling on Master Vulture's mountain in Rajagriha together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagavan was absorbed in a concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokitesvara looked upon the very practice that the profound perfection of wisdom had beheld those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Then through the power of Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokitesvara: how should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokitesvara said this to the Venerable Shariputra: Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly beholding those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty. Emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. Form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness, without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomenon. There is no I element, and so on up to and including no mind element and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on up to and including no aging and death, and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and dwell in the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the endpoint of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times also manifestly completely awaken to unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment and reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequaled, The mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering should be known as truth, since it is not false. The mantra of perfection and wisdom is declared. Tayata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasam Gate Bodhi Swaha. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagavan arose from that concentration and commended the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokitesvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage. It is like that. It is like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom, just as you have indicated. Even the Tathagatas rejoice. The Bhagavan having thus spoken, the Venerable Sharadvanti Putra, the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva Arya Avalokitesvara, and those surrounding in their entirety, along with the world of gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, were overjoyed and highly praised as spoken by the Bhagavan. Praise to Manjushri. Homage to my Guru and Protector Manjushri, who holds to his heart a scriptural text symbolic of his seeing of all things as they are, whose understanding shines forth as the sun, unclouded by delusions or traces of ignorance, who teaches in 60 ways with the loving compassion of a father for his only son, all creatures caught in the prison of samsara, confused in the darkness of ignorance, overwhelmed by their suffering. You whose dragon thunder-like proclamation of Dhamma arouses us from the stupor of our delusions and frees us from the iron chains of our karma, who wields the sword of wisdom, hewing down suffering wherever its sprouts appear, clearing away the darkness of all ignorance. You whose princely body is adorned with the 112 marks of a Buddha, who has completed the 10 stages achieving the highest perfections of a Bodhisattva, who has been pure from the beginning, I bow down to you, Manjushri. Om Ar Rapatsanadi. With the brilliance of your wisdom, O compassionate one, illuminate the darkness enclosing my mind. Enlighten my intelligence and wisdom so that I may gain insight into the Buddha's words and the texts that explain them. By the virtue of offering to you assembly of Buddhas visualized before me, this mandala built on a base, resplendent with flowers, saffron water and incense, adorned with Mount Meru and the 4 continents, as well as the sun and the moon. May all sentient beings share in its good effects. Please enjoy and bless me and all sentient beings to be released from the 3 poisonous minds, for I am offering without attachment my body, enemies, friends, and strangers, and all possessions without the objects of my greed, ignorance, and hatred. O holy and venerable Lama, from the clouds of compassion that form in the skies of your Dhammakaya wisdom, please release a rain of vast and profound Dhamma, precisely in accordance with the needs of those to be trained. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Nayatayami. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Gurus.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So I'm going to continue the commentary of chapter 3, and I'm going to revisit very briefly verse 12, which was at the conclusion of the last session. The verse reads, by giving up all, sorrow is transcended, and my mind will realize the sorrowless state. It is best that I now give everything to all beings in the same way as I shall at death. So this all in the first line, this giving up all, is referring to the 3 realms constituting, if you like, the operational domains of our afflicted attachment, namely our bodies, our possessions, and that's also our utilities, and our merits, our accumulated virtue. To give up our merits in this current context can be understood in 2 ways. Firstly, it refers to our estimation, our kind of assessment or our understanding of our own various worldly advantages, our gains, our personal achievements, especially as measured in competitive comparison to others. So we're dealing with a worldly mind here. Secondly, and on a more subtle level, It refers to our own personal advantage secured in the future in dependence on our accumulated imprints accumulated from our past virtuous actions. So in either case, we usually seek to secure and steer our personal advantages in a manner that is going to serve no purpose other than fulfilling the needs of the self-cherishing attitude. In other words, they're geared towards fulfilling our own cravings and desires. So the we, in our customary and self-absorbed sense, is the pivot or the object of address, if you like, of Shantideva's verse. So the all, then, refers to giving up completely everything that is going to enhance and nourish and enable the persistence of our self-grasping, self-cherishing. So it's in this way that we arrive at the intent of other lines in Shantideva's text. I'm going to quote here from chapter 8, verse 126, where Shantideva says, "Whatever suffering there is in the world arises from desiring one's own happiness." Couldn't be more explicit than that. And also regarding our newfound resolve based on taking the message of verse 12 from chapter 3 to heart, Shantideva says in chapter 8, verse 169, I quote, "The old days when you could ruin me are now gone." So in summary, relinquishing attachment to our bodies, our possessions and our merits enables us to open out to the vast and great prospect of exploring an entirely new freedom, one that's no longer bound by powerful afflictions and one that is no longer prescribed by destructive habits. As Geshe Chekwa vividly puts it, I quote, "In this way it is being taught, you'll soon become a genuine Dharma practitioner, one who has been rescued from the hazardous gorges of adversities and has arrived on the open plains of the remedies. These then are the points related to recognizing self-grasping as your enemy." So this amazing, indeed revolutionary resolve to move beyond self-grasping is founded on our awareness that the afflictions can be overcome. And this is clearly articulated by Gyaltsab Sabje in reference to his commentary on the third and fourth lines of verse 12, which read, the lines read, "It is best that I now give everything to all beings in the same way that I shall at death." Gyaltsab Sabje comments, "To surrender everything at once is equal to offering it, and to offer to sentient beings is the supreme offering, because through it one attains enlightenment." Now, I did touch upon this quote last week, but I wish to explore it just a little further. This is because our reason in our current context for overcoming our attachments and desires is not for ourselves, but for the purposes of others. This is critical. This can be appreciated if we consider how the profoundly compelling logic behind Gyaltsab Sabje's statement resides in the fact that as sentient beings are the supreme field to accumulate merit. And as God Subject says, it is therefore appropriate that we make offerings to them, just as we do to the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas and the holy beings. And just to comment on that, this is how we attain enlightenment and are best suited to ideally serve them. So this maneuver of sort of jumping over the self-grasping and treasuring others as more important than oneself is central to the mind training or the Lojong tradition. As Geshe Doga says, and he quotes, I quote, as one of the lines in the 8 verses of mind training reads, sentient beings are more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel. As explained in these teachings, sentient beings are extremely precious because by relying on them, we will gain all our temporary and ultimate goals. Now, this statement must be interpreted or can be interpreted in terms of ordinary benefits. Kabje Zopa Rinpoche illustrates with the highly fetishized yet prosaic example of money. And I quote, if we're alone and there are no other sentient beings, how can we make money? It is impossible. There is no way to receive money, no way to work, no matter how much we are educated. It is received by the kindness of other sentient beings. Even finding a job is due to the kindness of other sentient beings. So this includes money that we have to pay to the workers, to buy our possessions, other furnishings, cars and vehicles, all these things, our house, everything. All our possessions and enjoyments are received by the kindness of many different sentient beings. Not only human beings, but also many other non-human beings who have died or suffered so much for that. End of quote. So, in other words, money is an excellent example of our interdependence and reliance on the kindness of others, without whom we could not survive. Money only acquires its efficacy in this utterly cooperative social manner. It is valueless without community, consensus, and pointless without economies of public exchange. Marx famously called this commodity value, this sort of added-on quality, this fetishistic addition to this thing called money in this case, as commodity value, and actually described it as a fetish function because its value, this commodity value, was not intrinsic to the object money itself. But the point here is that we're to imply this analysis of interdependent cooperation and mutual dependency on to other aspects of our lives. The nature of our food chain, who makes our clothes, who creates medicines for our bodies, who tends to us when we're helpless infants, who buries us when we are dead, who educates our children, etc. But from a Bodhisattva perspective, we must also acknowledge that the manner in which other beings are so very kind to us and benefit us so immensely can be understood in terms of the extraordinary benefits that arise from treasuring them due to that. So we're referring here to our capacity to achieve liberation and full enlightenment. The essential unifying factor here is that sentient beings are once again to be recognized and acknowledged as like a wish-fulfilling jewel, in that they enable such super mundane attainments. Such are impossible to attain without relying on our mother sentient beings. They as Gelt Subje says, are our immense field of virtue. Paradoxically, without letting go and giving to them in this twofold manner, meaning in terms of temporal and ultimate purposes, we find ourselves impoverished and bereft. This is the case, as the Lamas often point out, even if we have vast repositories of wealth and stored in Swiss bank vaults, for example, where they sit untaxed. So I just mentioned that in passing. So this all invites us, I think, particularly as those aiming to be practitioners, to really, really deeply comprehend the logic, and I use those words in inverted commas, of the self-cherishing attitude, because self-cherishing spins a yarn, spins a narrative. It spins a seductive scenario into which we have fallen time and time and time again. It revolves around a false, and I'm going to call it a Faustian bargain here, which says, feed me, nurture me, care for me exclusively, and I'll grant you every boon. Self-grasping says, I promise to do this for you. But in reality, Faust, the selfish mind, will not honour this deal, because all it seeks is it's our subservience to it. And we'll only find this out later, or rather when it is too late, because we will find ourselves already its slave. As Aryadeva says in his 400, I quote, desire, verse 132, desire is no friend, but seems like one, which is why you do not fear it. But shouldn't people particularly rid themselves of a harmful friend? So this is precisely Shantideva's intent in these verses. So this is how we can approach the perhaps counterintuitive, at least from a self-grasping perspective, conclusion that we need to regard even our enemy, according to the Lodrong tradition, as our most precious friend, a treasure. Geshe Langri Tangpa, in his famous 8 Verses of Thought transformation, says, whenever I see beings who are of wicked nature and overwhelmed by negative actions and heavy suffering, I hold such rare ones dear, as if I had found a precious treasure. So in his commentary to the 8 verses, Geshe Chekwa says, since it is rare to find such a precious gem, we do not discard it, but rather keep it and cherish it. In the same way, beings of unpleasant character are not so easy to find, yet in dependence upon them, compassion arises, and in dependence upon them, the awakening mind arises. Without making deliberate efforts, it is rare to encounter such objects as these that allow us to develop the Mahayana paths. Geshe Chekwa goes on, he asks why, and he answers, because compassion does not arise towards the noble beings and those with worldly excellence. So they cannot help us enhance the awakening mind. They cannot lead us to the attainment of Buddhahood. So this Geshe Chekwa's commentary continuing, this is stated in the following, referring to Nagarjuna's commentary on the awakening mind. And the quote is, except for the awakening mind, the Buddhas do not uphold any other means. So in commentary on the same verse, Kabje Zopa Rinpoche says, and I quote, "When we see someone like that, it is like finding a wish-granting treasure, something to cherish, so precious and difficult to find again. That means that when we see someone with heavy suffering like this, strong compassion arises. Then, depending on that, bodhicitta arises. Then that makes us achieve enlightenment quickly. So that is why we should regard these pitiful sentient beings as like having found a wish-granting treasure. By developing compassion, it becomes wish-granting. All our wishes, even our ultimate wishes, succeed quickly." So again, this is exactly Shantideva's point. In chapter 6, verse 107, Shantideva says, "Like discovering a treasure in the home, without having to seek it through adversity, I'm delighted to find my enemy who helps me pursue awakening." So I just wanted to touch upon another point that I raised at the very end of last week's session, which is the need to discriminate between productive and destructive self-regard. And I'm just going to read a passage by His Holiness. However, His Holiness says, this is not to say that any form of self-regard is a source of suffering, because we do not need a sense of self, because we do need a sense of self, and also we do need our thoughts to have an element of self-regard. It is on the basis of a strong sense of self that we can proceed with many of the methods for obtaining liberation, salvation, helping others, and so on. Now, there is a problem when this form of self-regard becomes extreme, to the point that we are prepared to exploit others. We are prepared to totally sacrifice others' well-being in pursuit of that self-interest. In that form of extreme self-regard, a sense of self is a powerful problem. End of quote. So the point here is that if we conflate these two types of self-regard, we'll become very confused. We may even be in danger of injuring ourselves, turning upon ourselves in a harsh, even punishing way, and all in the name of a misguided notion or theory of spiritual practice. So the key point is that there is a legitimate form of self-regard, a wholesome one that is to be protected and nurtured, as though we were nurturing a tender seedling. This form of self-regard is positive and creative because it enables us to powerfully and skillfully amass the collections of merit that we dedicate for the purpose of others. And thus is to be wholeheartedly embraced and deeply celebrated. Indeed, we can and must happily and enthusiastically rejoice in our own positive deeds, thoughts, and compassionate inclinations. Shantideva will render this absolutely explicit in the final verses of chapter 3. So the reason cultivating the causes of enlightenment by generating the mind of bodhicitta is the most precious mind imaginable, because all benefits, the self and others, spontaneously arise and flow from there. Geshe Doga often emphasizes this point because it sort of seems paradoxical that by giving up the self, we obtain the self's happiness, because it wasn't the purpose to give it up. But this is what I mean by getting confused. So if we can give up the self in the sense of clinging selfishly to our own immediate fulfillments, we will obtain our goals of happiness inadvertently as we strive to fulfill the needs and wishes of others. It's sort of a spontaneous corollary of that compassionate, embracing attitude. So we don't need to worry whether this self that's been given up is somehow going to be lost and miss out, because we're going to be able to give rise to all our personal ambitions in any case. So you can see here it's quite an intriguing scenario that's being pictured. So I just want to sort of propose here that the part or the aspect of ourselves intent on looking after others is also our own most precious internal friend. And it's this trustworthy internal friend that is the one that is capable of lovingly reaching out to take care even of the so-called external enemy with the tenderness of a mother for her precious child. So if we can manage to do this, the delightful consequence is that our inner and our outer worlds will become perfectly harmonized, because as the Dharma teachings present, our real spiritual friends are none other than the positive potentials of our own mind. And it is with these potentials, by utilizing them, that we can accomplish the wishes and needs of others. So they're also the friends of others, aren't they? Considered in this symmetrical way, our inner and outer friends are one and the same. Let us raise that. As Kabje Zopa Rinpoche says, I quote, however, the only thing that needs to be developed is compassion for sentient beings. That is the source of happiness for every single hell being, hungry ghost, animal, human being, Shura being, Ashura being, and intermediate state being. Now, in relation to the opening lines of verse 12, Kunzang Pelden raises a hypothetical qualm. And so the lines are, by giving up all, sorrow is transcended, and my mind will realize the sorrowless state. So the hypothetical qualm is, we might wonder why it is necessary to abandon the three foundations of ego clinging, body, possessions, and virtues, even when we are not actually intending to achieve nirvana. Kunzang Pelden answers, the answer is that even if we do not give them away now, the fact is that when we die, we'll have to leave behind our body and possessions. And as for our virtues, either these will have been exhausted by moments of anger experienced in the past, or else, if this is not the case, they'll be consumed by the single experience of their fully ripened result. It is certain, therefore, that everything is destined to be entirely and pointlessly lost. Therefore, Kunzang Pelden concludes, in the present moment, when we have the freedom to act, it is best to give everything away to other beings for their happiness and benefit. For it is in this way the merit of such an action will not be exhausted, but will become the cause of obtaining the supreme goal. So I'll read that last sentence again, because I think it has enormous import. Therefore, in the present moment, when we have the freedom to act, it is best to give everything to other beings for their happiness and benefit. For it is in this way that the merit of such an action will not be exhausted, but will become the cause of obtaining the supreme goal. So in other words, we obtain the supreme goal through this act, even though we're not seeking, in this case, to obtain liberation as our own personal goal for ourselves. We have to obtain liberation or its equivalent and full enlightenment for the purpose of others, and in so doing, our own liberation and attainment is also accomplished. So you can see here that this pertains back to that very important distinction that His Holiness made between productive self-regard and destructive self-regard. So clearly the emphasis then is on how we respond to situations as they arise, as they manifest in the present moment. As they arise, the question we must ask ourselves, and this is Geshe Doga's question, are we currently fully seizing the scope of our current rarely achieved freedom to act and accumulate virtue for the benefit of others? End of quote. Because if we leave the task of accumulation to the moment of our actual death time, it will be too late. Perhaps we will have been intubated, heavily sedated with painkillers, and only have minutes left. So, as earlier indicated, this reality is potently conveyed by the last two lines of Shantideva's verse, which read, "It is best that I now give everything to all beings in the same way as I shall at death." So death awareness is a vital catalyst for practice, so that our practice can be imported or become active in each and every lived moment. This is the point. And this is how we arrive at the related question. Again, it's Geshe Doga's question. When we encounter or relate to any sentient being, do we immediately recall their great kindness and view them right now with unbiased and embracing loving kindness? What a great question to ask ourselves. Geshe Doga, with disarmingly profound simplicity, suggests that our litmus test in regard to directly assessing the quality of our love on these freshly emergent occasions, when it does get to arise, is when we take these practices to heart and gradually engage in them, then our strong sense of self-cherishing mind will start to loosen and become soft, like wool. Indeed, our whole demeanour will start to transform to naturally become more gentle and kind. So this is the litmus test. Are we becoming softer? Are we becoming more gentle? Are we becoming more kind? And not just when we're on our cushion, but in each and every lived moment of our emerging experience. So in other words, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. And it's from this candid experiential perspective that we can understand why the Buddha of Compassion, Chenrezig, is described with the honorific epithet as the one who looks with unwavering eye. Because we are softened by genuine love, as Geshe Doga puts it, we are found more porous, more relaxedly open to the nature of things. Endowed with love and compassion, we can allow people and experiences to unwaveringly appear in all their vividness to us. We don't need to flinch or slam shut our eyes when we see others in acute suffering or distress, for example. Thus, because we can see what is before us, we know exactly how to step forward and how best to intimately respond. I use the word intimately because there's no reason to barricade ourselves off in that moment, because our compassionate, softened attitude of love and compassion are enabling us to fully embrace the reality of what's there. So, endowed with at least a similitude of Chenrezig's unwavering eye, we can immediately appraise the situation before us with clear-sighted certainty, with a clarity that is at once unbiased and courageous. And I just want to sort of propose here that there's a great significance here in the fact that the 1,000-armed version or form of Chenrezig has an eye in each of the 1,000 palms, and they're all radiating out. So this is the perfect expression of the polyvalent and all-penetrative nature of true compassion. It pervades all realms, including those of the most severe lower realms. The 1,000 eyes also stand for the united activities of 1,000 Buddhas of the fortunate eon. And Kabje Zopa Rinpoche, when he talks about Chenrezig's 1,000 arms, quotes often from Gomo Rinpoche's text, the 100 verses of advice, and the verse is, "Your 1,000 arms signify 1,000 will-turning kings. Your 1,000 eyes signify the 1,000 Buddhas of the fortunate eon. You manifest in whatever aspect is needed to subdue sentient beings. To you, pure, compassionate-eyed one, I prostrate." So please don't think that I've wandered off the topic here. Chenrezig's 1,000 eyes are the perfect exemplification of the immense capacity of tender love that omnisciently, spontaneously penetrates to the very heart of things and touches and soothes away the pain of all sentient beings. And its source, at least potentially, is in our own hearts. So for me, this is the divine model of what we are seeking ourselves to achieve at Shantideva's instigation and by following his instructions. Building on this very point, Kabje Zopa Rinpoche inspiringly notes, and I quote, "We are always being guided by Chenrezig, who also manifests to us in human form, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, for example. When Chenrezig is a special deity karmically, while Chenrezig is a special deity karmically connected to the people of Tibet, Chenrezig is now also a special deity for the whole world. His Holiness the Dalai Lama, the actual Chenrezig, is special for the world, not only for Tibet." End of quote. So this is why I strive to quote His Holiness as often as I can in the course of these presentations. So our current situation, and we've had the opportunity, many of us have been with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, receiving teachings, is unbelievably fortunate. There is no better time for us to seek, to seek in order to accomplish all the advice of His Holiness. Now is the perfect moment for practice, in other words. So by seeking to soften and melt away the relentless contours of our self-grasping and self-cherishing, we are already stepping towards attaining Chenrezig's enlightened state the Buddha's blessings are already raining upon us. So I'm going to move to verse 13 now, and I just note that Gyaltsab Subje places that under the heading, that henceforth I give up the idea of having control over my body. The verse reads, having given this body up for the pleasure of all living beings, by killing, abusing, and beating it, may they always do with it as they please. Perhaps we need to take some care not to read this verse as a manifesto of masochistic tendencies, whereby we forfeit responsible care for ourselves. Such a perverse approach is resolved or whisked away once we recognize that the intent of Shantideva's verse is to stress that once our body has been given away, dedicated for the use of others, then why would we remain so tied to it? In the sense of seeking its advantages, even at the cost of destroying the welfare of others. As Kunzang Pelden summarizes, for he has put an end, referring to the practitioner, to the thought that it is his to control. So this relates to the earlier point that to seek to take our body back, having dedicated it for the benefit of others, is akin to stealing it. In other words, what we're discussing here is giving up attachment to the body. The emphasis is on mitigating attachment. The body is a mere pawn, if you like, in this bigger game. Referring to the advantages of giving up the body in this way, Geshe Doga, following Gyaltsab Subje, indicates that it will enable us to give up any anger towards others when they inflict any harm upon us. And this includes harming our body. This is really, really a very, very deep and profound thought, isn't it? Even if our body is being viciously attacked, because we've given our body away, we can look at that situation with our candid eye and see that that being is in an intense state of suffering and look at what we can do to benefit them in that very moment. So in other words, the body is no longer a basis for the generation of our anger. And it's likewise with our possessions and our merits. Giving up our crippling attachment to them as our inviolate, inalienable possession, therefore frees us to look at how we can begin to concern ourselves with benefiting other beings. So this is where dedication comes in again, because it karmically guides the outcome so that the goals of our actions will ripen in the most beneficial way. And Geshe Doga indicates that if we fail to dedicate skillfully, we will still perform a positive action, for example, but that action will be expended totally, as Kunzang Pelden was saying, when it ripens in a moment of pleasure, moment of delight. That will be the sum total of the benefit of that positive virtue that we've performed in the past. But if we dedicate it, the same action, towards a great goal, it will have limitless unfolding consequences and benefits. So Geshe Doga says, whenever we experience a temporary good result, we're actually using up our merit and virtue. Whereas if we dedicate our virtue for the benefit of other sentient beings, then whatever virtue we accumulate will be inexhaustible. So the act of selflessly giving away our virtue to all sentient beings is actually a supreme means to create an inexhaustible amount of virtue. And again, it's another aspect of that inexhaustibility is because our field of concern is inexhaustible, all sentient beings. So explaining the meaning of this extensively is Gyaltsabje's next heading, and he places verse 14 under it. And I quote, "Although they may play with my body and make it a source of jest and blame, because I've given it up to them, what is the use of holding it dear?" So Gyaltsabje indicates that the logic just described is irrefutable here, because we have not just given up our body, but we've given it up unconditionally. Therefore, whatever happens to it drops beyond the parameters of our selfish concern. The corollary, as Geshe Doga has just indicated in reference to the immediate preceding verse, is that we'll also no longer have a basis for generating anger and resentment when something is done to our body or our possessions or to our virtues. And this liberating or liberative attitude is captured in Aryashura's verse, and I quote, "Although someone against whom I have done no wrong should saw my head, splitting it into hundreds of pieces, I shall unceasingly hold him dear in my mind, just as a mother cherishes an only child." So this same powerful logic of cherishing others is also pursued in Shantideva's next verses. So 15, the heading is relating it to a suitable action. And the verse reads, "Therefore, I shall let them do anything to it that does not cause them any harm. And when anyone encounters me, may it never be meaningless for them." So the qualifier that does not cause them any harm is interesting to consider. The addition of those words in the verse by Shantideva safeguards against the use of my body that has been offered towards destructive ends. It's weaponization, if you like. Consider the human corpse, for example. Perhaps it is cut up, laced with arsenic, and used as a tasty bait to lure and kill hungry pests. Or an alternative action would be offering the same chopped up body, but not laced with arsenic this time, but maybe fragranced with beautiful incense, to vultures in the context of a sky burial. In this case, the use of the body would be virtuous, and in the former case, non-virtuous. Therefore, when Shantideva specifies that our body can be utilized by others in a manner that will not cause them any harm, the concern is therefore for the ethical stance of those intending to use it. We, as the dedicators of our body, of our virtues of giving away our body, are seeking to mitigate in anticipation any misappropriation of our future body for negative ends from the outset, thereby protecting those to exploit or misuse our body that's been offered. So the dedication in the third and fourth lines of this verse are equally profound. They say, and when anyone encounters me, may it never be meaningless for her. So anyone here means every single one without exception. So already we've cast the field very wide, haven't we? Likewise, may it never be meaningless. The never here means that we're embracing each and every circumstance in which this person, might be met in the future by anyone. How remarkable is this way of thinking? And when they see my body, maybe even merely glimpse it in the distance, may it immediately be a source of benefit for them. How remarkable is this intention? This is a totally different use of our body, isn't it? So it's really, really incredible to analyze, if you like. I've been doing a little bit of sort of dialectical analysis here of the logic involved in these thought transformation verses along the lines of overcoming self-cherishing and cherishing others. But this transactional power of these verses to radically alter the way in which experience is being interpreted by us is immense, and its effects are ongoing. So if we start to sort of loosen the knot in this way, we'll discover a greater and greater freedom to use these thought transformation techniques in the course of our everyday experience. So Gyaltsab Sabje says in his commentary that we think, may this body never be the cause for others to be disappointed. So this, in other words, is how we can project or cast our own future body in the form of a wish-fulfilling jewel. Isn't this remarkable? We're actually dedicating that our body will become a wish-fulfilling jewel, even the glimpse of which will fulfill the purposes and needs of others. So, of course, to really, really embrace the subtlety and the profundity of these ideas, we need to have a very real appreciation and acceptance of the law of cause and effect. And here are reminded of similar verses involving encounter in Arashura's aspiration in 70 verse. I'm going to quote these because it's, again, showing the incredible resonance between the different sets of teachings. Verse 60, even by beings merely remembering me, may I be a true friend to those who face destitution, solid armor for those stricken by a rain of arrows, and cooling water for those afflicted by fire. When beings remember me, may I be an opponent for the venom of defilements, a firm bridge over the torrent of the three worlds, and may I bar the door to unfortunate destinies. May even merely recollecting my name be enough to prevent all beings from falling into the abyss of worldly existence. May I become the foundation of the stairway leading them to the pinnacle of pure peace. Even if someone out of anger should recall my name for even an instant of time, may he never plunge into bad destinies, and may he surely accomplish perfect Buddhahood. End of quote. So once again, we're witnessing here the precision and the incredible creativity that we can bring to our tipping of the wish which you'll recall was discussed in an earlier session. And also the great wisdom of compassion is everywhere evidenced in Arashura's aspirations, because he invites us to recognize that sentient beings will be dreadfully prone to plunge into bad destinies due to the performance of powerful non-virtuous actions such as killing, perhaps even me. Therefore, by anticipating that the likelihood or the prospect of such a dangerous response, as bodhisattvas engaged in mind training, we seek to head the problem off at the pass, as it were. We preempt it by dedicating in such a way that mere contact with us, even in a non-virtuous way, will flip over into the most wondrous beneficial result for that person, even when they were intending us grievous harm. But the reality, even for the aspiring bodhisattva, is that due to being endowed with such a wondrous motivation, we are immune from harm. Only happiness will arise from our aspiration, and only benefits will flow from our actions. So how extraordinary, then, is this bodhicitta attitude? And how remarkably inventive we can make it be by adjusting it to work with each and every lived situation, as Shantideva is so vividly displaying. What underlies this entire discussion is not only a profound acceptance of the law of cause and effect, as just mentioned, but also a deep realization and embrace of the power of prayer. Hence, Arashura's verse, I quote, "Just as all the prayers of the subduers are the cause for helping sentient beings, so too may I work constantly to obtain the perfection of prayer." So you will recall that the power of prayer is one of the 5 powers utilized at the time of death. And it's referring to none other than the vigorous, sustained, and perfectly focused practice of dedication and aspiration, but particularly dedication. This is why Kabje Zopa Rinpoche says, "Dedicate your merits in this way. Due to the past, present, and future merits collected by me, and the merits of the 3 times collected by others, may I never be separated from bodhicitta during the time of death, during the intermediate stage, during rebirth, and at any time. May I never, ever be separated from bodhicitta, and may I have the quickest realization of bodhicitta." And Rinpoche asks us to pray in this way. And he says you can do this even while thinking of Lama Yeshe, who is one with Tara. So this leads us very appropriately to the next heading of Gelt Subje, which is dedicating the thought as the cause for inexhaustibility. And it's referring to verse 16, which reads, "If in those who encounter me a faithful or an angry thought arises, may that eternally become the source for fulfilling all their wishes." End of quote. So again, you can appreciate even at a glance the immense care with which Shantideva has pivoted these wishes. Irrespective of whether I am encountered with positive or negative states of mind, the results will be, due to the channeled force of my dedication, only beneficial. And not only temporarily beneficial, but eternally beneficial, meaning forevermore. In this way, the strength of the prayer is maximized. In fact, it becomes limitless. Likewise, the word source, and may that eternally become the source for fulfilling all their wishes. This word source renders me not as a solid, tangible object, but as a kind of limitless font of benefit. We become a stream, an endless stream of benefits that are continuously, magically pouring forth. I'm using the word magical here deliberately in its mystical sense. If we recall Chenrezig for a moment, Tabje Zopa Rinpoche indicates that it is said in the Avatamsaka Sutra, he quotes, "When the moon rises, numberless reflections appear wherever there is water in the world." That is how Chenrezig manifests, effortlessly, naturally. Chenrezig manifests in all kinds of forms, even as medicine, a bridge, or water. Chenrezig manifesting to sentient beings in whatever form benefits them does inconceivable work for sentient beings. If this is the case, there is no doubt that Chenrezig manifests as a virtuous friend or guide for us, giving us this opportunity to learn Dharma. So, moreover, we're to take that this limitless source does not fulfill just some wishes, meaning only certain particular or selected wishes, but all wishes. So thus it's becoming the perfectly inexhaustible panacea. The word faith that we find in the second line of the verse indicates those who relate to me out of appreciation. So we wish them every benefit. And likewise, though, do we wish benefit for those who relate to me with anger or hostility? It's irrelevant to us how they relate in this regard. Our only concern is for their well-being. So you can see here that in Shantideva's pivoting of the words of the verse, he's anticipating both kinds of possible responses and governing the outcome through careful direction so that those who encounter me will experience benefit irrespective of whether they're being driven by powerful afflictive minds or relatively benign states of mind. So as Geshe Doga indicates, all of this makes for another incredibly encompassing aspiration designed to benefit everyone. Verse 17, dedicating the action as a cause for inexhaustibility. And the verse reads, "May all who say bad things to me or cause me any other harm, and those who mock and insult me have the fortune to fully awaken." So you can see here, as indicated by Gyaltsen Sabje's heading, there's a slight shift of focus or emphasis from thought as a cause of inexhaustibility to action as a cause for inexhaustibility. So here the actions are indicated by examples, or they're illustrated by examples of hostile speech acts, such as addressing me with bad words, mocking or insulting me, or causing me any other harm. Whatever, the big meaning in that whatever the precise nature of the verbal attack, whatever the strength of the negative action that might be driving their verbal attack, I am steering my dedication so that it will only turn around as benefit for them. We know from other discussions, such as concerning the root Bodhisattva vows, that abusing or criticizing a holy object, such as a Buddha or a Bodhisattva, those intent on accumulating incredible virtue, incurs incredibly heavy karmic consequences. So this is also part of Shantideva's reasoning here. So realizing this grave danger, I'm seeking to head off such a disastrous situation for such a person by changing the grammar of the equation. Irrespective of what they say or do, I dedicate that only immense benefit, both temporal and ultimate, will come of it. So Shantideva now moves into lays out a sequence of further dedications. And they're all engaging in this transformational logic that I've been attempting to capture and describe. And due to their cohesion as a sort of sequence or suite of verses, Gyaltsabje places them under a banner headline, which is dedicating oneself to become the cause of necessities. In order to convey this meaning very clearly, and also to capture the great poetic power, I shall first simply quote them, starting with verse 18 and finishing with verse 22. May I be a protector for those without one, a guide for all travellers on the way. May I be a bridge, a boat, and a ship for all who wish to cross the water. May I be an island for those who seek one, and a lamp for those desiring light. May I be a bed for those who wish to rest, and a slave for all who want a slave. May I be a wishing jewel, a magic vase, powerful mantras, and great medicine. May I become a wish-fulfilling tree and a cow of plenty for the world. Just like space, and just like the great elements such as the earth, may I always support the life, for all the realms of varied beings. And until they pass away from pain, may I also be the source of life for all the realms of varied beings that reach until the ends of space. So in this same exact way, by seeking to precisely emulate the manner in which the previous Sagatas have given birth to an awakening mind, and just as they have successively dwelt in the Bodhisattva's practices, I resolve, likewise, just as they have done, may I also right now give birth to an awakening mind, and likewise successively follow the practices, meaning engaging in the Bodhisattva's deeds of the 6 perfections, the 4 means of gathering disciples, and so on. Because it is in this way, and only in this way, that I will be able to accomplish the aspirations just made in these verses, to be a wishing jewel, a magic vase, a bridge, a boat, and a ship for those who wish to cross the great water, etc. So it's on this enlightened basis, and only upon this enlightened basis, that I will be just like space and the great elements such as the earth, in order to always support the life of all boundless creatures. So we now arrive at an incredibly important and momentous moment. It's unbelievably important moment in this text, which is the actual generation of engaging and aspiring bodhicitta. As His Holiness and other commentators indicate, this arrives with verses 23 and 24. So I'll now quote 23. Just as the previous Sugātas gave birth to an awakening mind, and just as they successively dwelt in the Bodhisattva's practices, 24, likewise for the sake of all that lives, do I give birth to an awakening mind, and likewise shall I too successively follow the practices. So these very precious verses are the culmination of the wishes and dedications we've been making. And it's a culmination because we've now moved from the status of a wish, may I, to an actual mind generation, to a commitment to an actual mind generation, indicated in the verse by just as I will also give birth to an awakening mind, referring to aspirational bodhicitta, and likewise shall I too successively follow the practices, indicating the actual commitment to engaging bodhicitta by engaging the graduated practices leading to enlightenment. So the word actual here in Gyaltsabje's heading has enormous import. Gyaltsabje also refers to the previous verses as preparations towards this point. You'll also notice in these two verses the introduction by Shantideva of the first person speaking voice. This is to render it utterly unambiguous that it is we ourselves who are making this actual pledge from the depths of our heart. It is the very fulfillment of the aspirations that we have been making and will continue to make. Thus, it arises as a vital imperative that we must emulate the manner in which the previous enlightened ones have accomplished their goal. And this way, in these, we see in the lines here, likewise shall I too successively follow the practices. So we're determined, in other words, to exactly emulate the Buddhas, both in thought and deeds. Gyaltsabje's commentary on these two verses says, when the previous Tathagatas generating the mind of enlightenment, they initially generated the supreme wishing bodhicitta in front of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and then to take the Bodhisattva vows, they generated engaging bodhicitta. Subsequently, they trained and remained in the gradual Bodhisattva trainings. Likewise, this is Gyaltsabje's voice, I, for the temporary and ultimate benefit of sentient beings, either in front of an actual preceptor with pure bodhicitta vows, or in front of the invoked Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, upon the request for attention, shall generate the wishing mind of enlightenment. Likewise, I shall train and remain in the gradual trainings upon having generated an engaging mind. And Gyaltsabje adds, repeat the verses 3 times, either after the preceptor or, if there is none, after the invoked Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. So that's the end of Gyaltsabje's quote. Due to the utmost importance of this ceremonial conferral of the Bodhisattva vows, and indeed Shantideva's verses can and are frequently used for exactly this purpose, I recommend studying them very closely. And so therefore I refer you to Geshe Doga's extensive commentary, which is found in Block 7, the 3rd of December 2013, Week 3. So I'll just repeat that. Block 7, 3rd of December 2013, Week 3. So I'm now going to unpack some of the detail. When is the vow actually received? That's the first point. As Gyaltsabje indicates, the vow is recited 3 times, and the actual vow is received upon completion of the 3rd repetition. Kunzang Pelden likewise indicates the actual moment when the vow is received is the 3rd repetition of the formula. And he adds, and at that time, one should have the conviction that the vows of bodhicitta in intention and action are obtained in one's mind. So there's a great significance here that we should have the conviction that we have actually received the vows upon the conclusion of the 3rd repetition. This occasion is truly momentous, and we're to feel this at the very core of our being. And it's even good, of course, to meditate on this state with no rush to move on. This is to consolidate the extraordinary significance of the moment. We are now holding as our essential purpose, our mission or commitment to become fully enlightened for the benefit of others. Such an undertaking is the most extraordinary and the most significant promise that we have ever made up to this point across countless lifetimes. Geshe Doga observes, we repeat 2 verses, these 2 verses 3 times after a preceptor if they are present, or if there is no preceptor, we imagine repeating them after the invoked Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. And Kunzang Pelden indicates that taking the vow with a preceptor is the optimal method. He says to take the vow from a fully qualified teacher is the best way to engender within oneself a moral conscience and a sense of propriety with regard to the observance of the vow. However, having said this, because such ideal circumstances aren't always available to us, we're to understand that, as does Kunzang Pelden, who says, nevertheless, if one pronounces it in the presence of the 3 representations of the Buddha's body, speech, and mind, of a visualized field of refuge of the Mahayana, one does indeed receive the vow. End of quote. So this is very edifying. It is also very often the case that we do first receive the vows before our preceptor, and then we take them again, even on a daily basis, in front of the visualized Mahayana refuge objects as part of our daily practice. And again, we're not to feel that taking the vows in this way is somehow deficient or incomplete. This is because whether we have taken them from a preceptor or from the visualized refuge field, we are still receiving the vow from someone else. This is really important. We're not receiving the vow from ourselves. We're receiving the vow from the perfect field of virtue, emblematized as the refuge field, visualized, or in the embodiment of the preceptor conferring the vows, who's actually carrying the vow in their mental continuum. As Geshe Sonam Rinchen indicates, this highlights one of the special beneficial features of the Bodhisattva vow. I quote, "The Bodhisattva vow has certain special features. The first of these is that it is conferred by somebody else. When we are tempted to transgress the vow, remembering the spiritual teacher from whom we received it arouses a healthy sense of embarrassment, which acts as a restraint." So this point is not to be underestimated. By merely thinking of the perfect ethical conduct of our preceptors, as well as the perfectly accomplished virtue of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and holy beings whom we have invoked, we are made acutely aware of why we have taken the vow and why we seek to purely maintain it. By becoming a Buddha's child, we will follow in their footsteps. And this determination is further enhanced by recognizing the other special features which Geshe Sonam Rinchen identifies. He says, the second feature is that the vow fosters a pure state of mind. Our sense of self-esteem as a bodhisattva and our dedication to this pure state of mind prevent us from creating transgressions that result from copying others' behavior or trying to improve our personal reputational livelihood. And the third feature, special feature, is that the vow can be restored. The fourth is that by respecting, cherishing, and being mindful of it, our observance of the vow will not decline, and we will not suffer guilt or regret. To ensure happiness and to avoid regret while holding the vow, we try not to damage it and to quickly repair it when we do." End of quote. So in summary, due to holding the actual vow, we will accumulate merit continuously day and night for as long as we hold it. And so we should savor this reality with the immense dignity and import that it deserves. As Kabje Zopa Rinpoche says, without ego then in my mind, in my heart is bodhicitta, which by having in the 24 hours of the day, even my breathing in and breathing out, not even talking of other activities, just breathing in and out will benefit all living beings, numberless living beings. If there is no ego, then there'll be bodhicitta in my heart, which means that besides all the actions of eating, walking, sitting, sleeping, doing practices, even just each breath in and out becomes a cause of happiness for all the numberless living beings, benefits numberless living beings. You become the source of numberless living beings' happiness because of your bodhicitta, the thought of cherishing others to achieve enlightenment for them. So you become the source of happiness for all the sentient beings who are numberless. So you accumulate merit in every second, like the sky, good karma, good luck, like the sky in every second, because of this bodhicitta attitude. So the next sort of topic to unpack is that we can take either or both of the two stages of generating bodhicitta, aspirational and engaging. And we've already distinguished between these two when we looked at verses 15 and 16 in chapter 1. I'll just quickly quote those. Shantideva said, "In brief, the awakening mind should be understood to be of two types: the mind that aspires to awaken and the mind that ventures to do so. All is understood by the distinction between aspiring to go and actually going. so the wise understand in turn the distinction between these two. So we can recall the distinction there. But the distinction also means that there is a slight difference in the procedural manner of taking aspirational and engaging Bodhisattva vows. This is because in the case of aspirational bodhicitta, one promises not to give up that aspiration, whereas with the engaging vows, one promises never to forsake these vows, even at the cost of our lives. And so this emphasis, as Geshe Doga indicates in his commentary, is emphasized in the 6-session yoga practice. So I'm now going to refer to just taking the aspirational vows, because His Holiness outlines this method for the benefit of all beings. And I'm going to quote it in full because of its incredible significance. His Holiness: aspirational bodhicitta is the vow to generate the same intention as the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the past. Application or engaging is the vow to accomplish, as they did, all the activities of the path to enlightenment for the sake of all beings. Today, His Holiness says, we shall only take the vow of aspiration. To do this, we shall read through the 2nd and 3rd chapters of the Guide to a Bodhisattva's Way of Life, up until the 2nd line of verse 23, gave birth to an awakening mind, and try to concentrate on the meaning and afterwards rejoice in what we have done. His Holiness elaborates. He says, in order to take this vow, we should imagine that in front of us are the Buddhas and the 8 close disciples, the 6 ornaments and the 2 supreme teachers, including Shantideva and all the realized masters of the Buddhist tradition, in particular the holders of the Sakya, Golok, Kagyu and Nima schools of Tibet. In fact, all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Consider also that we are surrounded by all beings in the universe. With this visualization, we now recite the 6-branch prayer. And this is referring to verses 18 to 22, and I'll quickly read those. May I be a guard for those who are protectorless, a guide for those I've actually made a mistake there. So the 6-branch prayer we've already dealt with earlier on in chapter 2, the 2nd part, and in the 1st section of chapter 3. So His Holiness says that we then recite verses 18 to 22 of the 3rd chapter, and they read, may I be a guard for those who are protectorless, a guide for those who journey on the road, for those who wish to cross the water, may I be a boat, a raft, and a bridge. May I be an isle for those who yearn for land, a lamp for those who long for light, and for all needing a resting place, a bed. For all who need a servant, may I be their slave. May I be the wishing jewel, the vase of wealth, words of power, and supreme healing. May I be the tree of miracles for every being, the abundant cow. Just like the earth and space itself and all the other mighty elements, for boundless multitudes of beings, may I always be the ground of this life, the source of varied sustenance. Thus, for everything that lives, as far as the limits of the sky, may I constantly be their source of livelihood until they pass beyond sorrow. And His Holiness comments that these last 2 lines, may I be constantly their source of livelihood until they pass beyond sorrow, are incredibly significant, are they not? The lives of the great beings depend on the presence of the elements. So let us think, just like the earth, may I support beings as numberless as the sky is vast. And as long as they have not attained enlightenment, may I dedicate myself entirely to their happiness. Let us make heartfelt wish to attain Buddhahood for their sake, and vow never to give up this thought. If some of you are not Buddhists or feel that you are not able to keep such a vow, then you simply need to think, may all beings be happy. Those of you who wish to take this vow of aspiration, please sit up straight or kneel on your right knee and fold your hands, and then repeat after me 3 times the lines I'm going to read in Tibetan. These are the first 2 lines of verses 23 and 24, preceded by teachers, Buddhas, Bodhisattvas. Listen. His Holiness continues, I visualize the Buddhas in front of me, and you should consider that I am a sort of messenger or intermediary. Consider that we are surrounded by all the beings in the universe and develop compassion for them. Think of the Buddha and feel great devotion towards him. Now with compassion and devotion pray, may I attain Buddhahood, and recite, teachers, Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, listen. Just as the Buddhas of the past have brought forth the awakened mind, likewise for the benefit of beings, I will bring to birth the awakened mind. When we recite these lines for the 3rd time at the words, I will bring birth to the awakened mind, think that you have generated bodhicitta in the very depths of your heart, in the very marrow of your bones, and that you will never go back on this promise. Traditionally, we now recite the last 9 verses of the chapter as a conclusion of taking the vow. So we won't do that now, but I'm not conferring the vow. I'm just showing in detail the procedural way of doing so, according to His Holiness the Dalai Lama, in relation to the aspirational vow. So clearly then, in the case of ceremonially receiving the aspirational vow, the emphasis is on giving birth to the awakened mind. It is an initial but crucial opening the door, as it were. Geshe Yeshe Tobten metaphorically likens this aspiring mind to a small diamond sliver, whereas the venturing mind, the engaging mind, the bodhicitta in actions, is like a whole diamond. And they are both more precious than the mind of a Hinayana arhat, which is, in this context, compared to gold. He adds, the bodhicitta of aspiration will not only bring the qualities and attributes of bodhicitta to fruition in the future, but it may also bring numerous benefits in this very lifetime, though not as many as the bodhicitta of action. Those who develop the bodhicitta of aspiration are called bodhisattvas, a name we cannot ascribe to the Hinayana arhat. So the next sort of topic to slightly unpack at least is the case of the engaging vow. In the case of the engaging vow, we add on the additional last 2 lines of verse 24, which you'll notice that His Holiness omitted. And they read, and likewise shall I too successively follow the practices. So this might seem like a small or minor detail, but the significance is enormous in that we're now additionally promising to practice just as the previous Sagatas have done. We are committing to carrying out the same deeds and thus to successively dwell in the Bodhisattva practices as they have done. So, as mentioned several talks ago, this means that we'll dynamically immerse ourselves in the activities that lead gradual step by gradual step to full enlightenment, namely the 6 perfections, which are themselves perfected sequentially, in that becoming surpassed in one enables us to become surpassed in the next. So while on the Bodhisattva grounds, for example, we first become unsurpassed in the perfection of generosity and then in the perfection of ethics and so on. So Geshe Yeshe Tobten says, the Bodhisattva vow refers to the bodhicitta of action. Developing bodhicitta is a very demanding task. We succeed only with unwavering determination. Understanding various logical reasons and understanding the benefits involved, our resolve becomes firm. We vow to keep this mind of this type of mind until enlightenment. On the downside, and I'm using that sort of word provisionally, if we fail to engage in the engaging practices in this way, we will be breaking our engaging bodhisattva vow. And the scope for doing so is correspondingly greater because of the scope of the practices involved. So it's for this reason that His Holiness often presents the aspiring vow alone. It is less precarious, relatively speaking, because it's less vulnerable to loss or breakage. But nonetheless, it's unbelievably auspicious to take, because when the conditions are accumulated at some future time, they will ripen as the capacity to take the next step, namely to embrace engaging bodhisattva vows. Fully engaging in the bodhisattva's deeds as previous bodhisattvas have done. So the commitments for those who have just taken aspiring bodhicitta, Geshe Doga says, generating aspirational bodhicitta involves making the commitment to generate the mind of enlightenment 3 times during the day and 3 times during the night, and not to give up that aspiration. As it does not involve making a commitment to uphold all of the bodhisattva vows, it is a mere aspiration and not actually a vow. So this raises a technical point that we do not actually take or receive the actual bodhisattva vows until we take them at the level of engaging, at which point we commit to upholding the associated commitments not to transgress certain actions. But it can still be said that we vow to generate an awakening mind as an aspirational bodhicitta, someone who's received aspirational bodhicitta, in the manner in which His Holiness has described it in a ceremonial context. Regarding the commitments associated with engaging bodhicitta, these can be enumerated as the 18 root downfalls and the 46 secondary infractions, the latter of which are arranged or grouped under the various perfections. So that's a complex topic for another time. So I'm going to move on to the next heading. If both are to be taken, the 2 vows can be taken either simultaneously or sequentially. So Kunsang Pelden notes that generally speaking, there are 2 ways the vow is pronounced. Firstly, either according to the tradition of Nagarjuna or according to the tradition of Asanga. In the tradition of Asanga, the vows of bodhicitta, of intentional bodhicitta and engaging bodhicitta are taken separately, whereas in the tradition of Nagarjuna, they are taken together. So I just want to sort of indicate here that it's up to the conferring master which of these 2 methods is adopted and thus how they will choose to present. I mention this as some of us will have noticed this variation on various ceremonial occasions. On this same point, Geshe Doga observes that the method presented by Shantideva here in chapter 3 is the simultaneous method. He says, aspiring bodhicitta and engaging bodhicitta can be presented sequentially or simultaneously at the same time. This is the simultaneous presentation. And Geshe Doga continues, as His Holiness the Dalai Lama indicated in Sydney earlier this year, when you take the vows sequentially, some lines relate to aspirational bodhicitta and other lines relate specifically to the engaging bodhicitta vows. He then clearly distinguished the lines containing aspirational bodhicitta from the lines relating to engaging bodhicitta vows. And then Geshe Doga asks, do you recall that? So this has just been indicated. The point is that from the simultaneous point of view, the recipient themselves consciously intends from the outset of the ceremony to take them together while reciting the lines. Those only intending from the outset to take the aspirational vows would not commit in their heart to taking the engaging vows or taking it at the level of engaging, even if those words are presented in the ceremony. So you can see here there's a certain calculation and adjustment required of us as the recipients in advance of receiving or participating in the ceremony. Again, we're reminded that the mental attitude of aspirational bodhicitta is a stepping stone for engaging bodhicitta. Geshe Doga says, following that generation of aspiring bodhicitta, I shall train and remain in the gradual trainings upon having generated the engaging mind. Thus, the engaging mind bodhicitta is based on the earlier aspiration to achieve enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. What is added to the aspirational mind is the commitment. I will engage in the practices of the 6 perfections as a way to develop my mind, and engage in the practices of the 4 means of gathering disciples as a way of benefiting others. So, considered as a stepping stone, we can fully appreciate the subtlety of this following point by Gel Subje, and I quote, to take the engaging mind after having first taken the wishing, aspiring mind, and then training in the wish to practice the perfections is the supreme method that accords with the differences in different persons. It is also suitable to take the 2 minds sequentially in one ceremony. So some additional points. Having taken the Bodhisattva vows, we are to understand that we should take them again and again. Geshe Doga says, what is important for us to really keep in mind is that these are the instructions on how to take the Bodhisattva vows. For those who are inclined and who have previously taken the vows, it is permissible, even necessary, to take these vows throughout one's practices. And we have seen we take these vows on the basis of refuge. So reciting the refuge and bodhicitta prayer with the proper motivation and intention and appropriate visualization will suffice as a means to take the Bodhisattva vows. So there are many of our daily practices that embed these verses for taking the vows in them. So we to feel each time that we've refreshed and invigorated the vows and to the best of our ability. So there is some debate about the meaning of the instruction to practice the deeds sequentially for those who have committed to engaging. Some commenters say that the meaning of sequential means that one practices firstly the morality of restraint on the first path, then the path of accumulation and the morality of building up virtue on the path of preparation, and morality of benefiting others on the Arya paths, referring to the 3rd through to the 10th Bodhisattva grounds. But according to Tsongkhapa and according to Gyaltsab Sabje and others, this is not correct. So this is splitting up the 3 kinds of morality into different stages of the path. Yeshidoga says why this isn't correct. As I've previously explained, all the Bodhisattva's activities can be subsumed into 2 main categories: engaging in activities to ripen oneself and engaging in activities to ripen other sentient beings. There are no activities that are not combined in these 2. The morality of restraint and the morality of building up virtues are specifically practices related to ripening one's own mental continuum, whereas the morality of benefiting others is an activity of ripening other sentient beings' continuums. This is how the Bodhisattva's activities are subsumed into the 3 moralities. The 6 perfections can be subsumed into these 2, those that are mainly to fulfill one's own purpose and those that are mainly to fulfill the purpose of others. So in other words, the 3 moralities are characterized by different focuses rather than by being applied at different times. The key point is that engaging bodhicitta must engage all 3 together in a comprehensive, integrated fashion. Otherwise, either our own goal of accomplishing enlightenment won't be met, or our goal of accomplishing the enlightenment or the purposes of others won't be met. The kind of path will fall apart in its integrity, in other words. So I've got 10 minutes. I might read. No, I actually might stop here because the last 9 verses are to be read after receiving the vow, and they have, again, a beautiful poetic cohesion. And I want to just give a little bit of annotation to them to sort of increase our appreciation of their very, very special flavour. So I might leave that to next week's session and then continue. I'm also very conscious that we're reaching the end of chapter 3. We've got 3 classes to go, and there are different ways of sort of proceeding, and I'm not quite sure how I've resolved to move forward at the moment. But one possibility was to give a kind of synopsis of the remaining chapters, and particularly that's appropriate to do I'm just trying to get to the end of my notes here. The remaining chapters are all detailed instructions of how to proceed on the path. So they arise in dependence on us having put our foot upon it by taking aspirational or engaging vows. So you can see here that the incredible precision of exposition of Shantideva continues throughout the text. So all of the practices of the 6 perfections, in other words, are embodied in the instructions that have come. So it'd be incredibly ambitious to think I could do justice to that in several sessions, but I'll just have to see how it shapes up. Are there any comments from your side about possible approaches moving forward?
Yes,
Yeah,
I
go
think
ahead.
you should just keep teaching. Don't stop
Plodding-
this class. Let's
plodding
just
along.
keep going and going and going, please.
The other way of approaching it is exactly to just simply start the fourth chapter with the same kind of care for the individual verses that I've been doing. And then in the last session, we could put special emphasis on maybe just touch on the wisdom chapter, and also to give some examples of the expansive dedications found in the 10th chapter, the famous 10th chapter. So does that sound okay? Stephen, have you got any suggestions there, or?
Yeah, so I'm definitely interested in an expansion of the 9th chapter. I think there's a lot of interesting material there. Yeah, and if we're going to stick to the remaining 3 classes, yeah, that's not a lot of time. You know, one thing I've experienced, I don't know if this is something you want to do, Ross, is that sometimes the verses are just read out. And I've been in this situation before, and perhaps others have, where all of a sudden the time grows very short. And so the teacher will read the verses very quickly, but as a sort of oral transmission. You know, I don't want to put that on to you. That would be your decision. And really, I have to say, in the end, I'm happy with what you decide to do, what you think is best for the students.
I think the reason for that is...
Go ahead.
Oh, so there's a very particular reason for the teachers doing that, of course, which is to receive the lung, the blessing lineage of the teaching, so that we implant the seeds for the realization of the entire text in our mental continuum. In order to do that sort of thoroughly, normally we do a line-by-line commentary, as Geshe Dogu has done. And then if there's time lacking, then they'll, as you mentioned, read. His Holiness frequently, as we can see from many of his commentaries on Gaudra Bodhisattva's Way, leaves amidst strategically vast slabs of the individual chapters and just highlights 1 or 2 verses. But he does give the oral lung in Tibetan of the other verses at lightning speed. So would be struggling to give a lung in English in 3 classes comfortably. I mean, we could do it. We sometimes read the entire text at Tara Institute, and it takes about 4 hours. But particularly the wisdom chapter, in Batchelor's translation, it's been turned into prose, whereas in the original Sanskrit, it was in verse, and much more compact and much more precise. So that's also something to keep in mind. Yeah. I think because this topic was talking about the Bodhisattva's practice, rather than a commentary on Gaudra Bodhisattva's way of life, the way it was sort of presented as a basic program, I feel that we're using Gaudra Bodhisattva's way of life as this most incredibly rich and extraordinary resource. So from that point of view, I feel more comfortable not feeling the need to give an entire lung, if you like, of the text, but to really hope that we've planted the seed of bodhicitta, or begun to fertilize and ripen it if it was already happily sitting there. So
yeah, Ross, you know, when you put it that way, that makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah. And Lou, do you have any thoughts?
Doing it the way,
Well, just various
the whole
possibilities.
lung is not the best thing to do. Would be to have extra classes, but if we can't do that, then just maintaining the intensity of what you're doing would be most helpful.
Yeah.
It's that intensity that bringing in everything else from the outside that enriches it, that makes it worth listening to.
In relation to that, the next chapter is conscientiousness, without which we have no hope of holding our Bodhisattva vows successfully. And that is why that chapter is coming next. So from your point of view, Lou, there's a great logical reason to emphasize those immediate verses following this moment in the text, because it has a great significance in terms of us practicing successfully. So if we lack conscientiousness, we become unbelievably scattered and careless and don't even think to remember our commitment of bodhicitta in certain situations, let alone practice with precision. So Shantideva really, really develops the need for conscientiousness in incredible detail in that chapter. Well, I might leave it there because I don't think there's a right and wrong way of proceeding. I'm just going to see how it emerges. I've been sort of thinking about it very deeply, and I have tried to proceed at a spanking pace, and I've actually covered in my own way over a year of Geshe Doga's discourses, and many of the months had 5 weeks in them. So we're dealing with a lot of talks. So I've been going about 2/3 quicker. Not to say that's better, but I have been pushing in my own way forward as much as I can. Jay, do you have any ideas?
I've just got to scoot to go to the Vajrasattva practice.
Yeah.
But I agree. I think slow and careful is best
All right.
for whatever we've got. That would be my vote. Thank you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
oh, by the way, I enjoy rewatching. That's helpful for me as well.
Oh, lovely. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you. So let's dedicate, and I'll ask Lou to lead the prayers. Thank you.
Dedication prayers from Shantideva. For as long as space endures, and for as long as living beings remain, till to then may I too abide to dispel the misery of the world. May all the pains of living creatures ripen solely upon myself, and through the might of the Bodhisattva Sangha, may all beings experience happiness. May the teachings which are the sole medicine for suffering and the origin of every joy be materially supported and honored and abide for a very long time. I prostrate to Manjughosha, through whose kindness wholesome minds ensue, and I prostrate to my spiritual masters, through whose kindness I develop. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings, without exception, into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow. May that which has arisen never diminish, but increase more and more. May my Venerable Lama's life be firm, his white divine action spread in all the 10 directions, dispelling the darknesses of all the beings in the 3 realms. His Holiness the Dalai Lama, the wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world, to the incomparably kind Tenzin Gyatso I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. In the land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All-powerful Chenrezig, Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until cyclic existence is ended. Lama Zopa Rinpoche, you who uphold the Sadhu's moral way, who serve as the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjunath's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplished magnificent prayers, honoring the 3 jewels, save of myself and others, your disciples, please, please live long. Tenzin Osulhita, Venerable One, to you whose kindness exceeds that of all the conquerors, for those wanderers in far-off places, especially the West, mindful of your loving concern for us and intentionally descending again into a family of a far distant land, we make this request. O Lama, please, please live long. Geshe Lobsang Doga, you with an immutable vow to spread to the limits of space the Dharma of the Able One in general, and the Dharma of the pure-minded conqueror, supreme, superior spiritual friend of unrepayable kindness, please remain for hundreds of eons and bestow the supreme and common cities. Geshe Tupten Sherab, beloved teacher leading your students toward wisdom and compassion, explaining through exacting discernment the steps of the graduated path. You are the unequaled guide. Please live a long and stable life. Chom Dain De Dejin Sheikh Padra Chompayan Dagpa Zog Pesan Ge Nampanan Zai O Ki Gyalpola Shag Shalo Jangchub Sempa Sempa Chenpo Kyuntu Zang Pola Shang Shalo Tayata Panchagriya Ava Bodhani Swaha Om Duru Duru Jaye Mukhe Swaha Tayata Panchagriya Ava Bodhani Swaha Om Duru Duru Jaye Mukhe Swaha Tayata Panchagriya Ava Bodhani Swaha Om Duru Duru Jaya Mukhe Swaha Tayata Panchagriya Ava Bodhani Swaha Om Duru Duru Jaya Mukhe Swaha Tayata Panchagriya Ava Bodhani Swaha Om Duru Duru Jaya Mukhe Swaha Tayata Panchagriya Ava Bodhani Swaha Om Duru Duru Jaya Mukhe Swaha Tayata Panchagriya Ava Bodhani Swaha Om Duru Duru Jaya Mukhe Swaha.
Thank you very much, everyone. Been a delight to spend some time with you and look forward to seeing you next week.